Legacy point number 2 is this: accountability and trust. Accountability and trust. I'd like to start actually with a scripture. In Malachi chapter 4, verse 6 says this: "And he will turn the hearts of the fathers to their children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers." I think I'd even like to read it this way: "He will turn the hearts of the parents to their children, and the hearts of the children to their parents." Like I said, I really believe it should be parenting reconnect, parenting reconciliation, to really come to that point of being reconciled, that God did that for us, that he's reconciling us to himself and then to one another. He's really calling us to be there. And as I shared, that 60% of teenagers, when they go off to college, have walked away from the church. And again, why? I think that they're going, this is just my mom and dad's faith. This is my grandparents' faith. And there's something about pushing away from that to say it's now mine, and say, what do I believe? Why don't we do that now? Why, instead of pushing away, do you remember the story of the woman at the well? All right, so Jesus stops and talks to this woman at the well, right? You remember the story? And Jesus talking to her, asked for a drink of water, and he said what? "I can give you living water that can flow from inside of you." And she said, "Give it to me." And she said, and then he said what to her? "Go and call your husband." And she said, "I don't have a husband." And he said, "Rightly have you said you have no husband, for you have had 5. And the man you're living with now is not your husband." And she says something really profound. "I perceive you're a prophet." You think? But they go on and she tells all her sins, but somehow in such a loving way, what does she do? She runs back to the village and says what? "Come and met a person that has told me all about me." And people are looking, "And you want us to meet him? And he knew everything you did?" He said, "But maybe this is the Christ. Maybe this is the one." So they went out convinced by this woman, and they heard him for themselves. Then you know what it says there in John 4? The people looked and said, "We no longer believe just because you told us, for we have heard for ourselves." Part of this independence thing is coming to know what you believe, not just as part of the family. They've made that commitment for you at your baptism. They've said that for you. But you know what? It's got to be personal. It's got to come to a point where you're saying, you know what? This faith is my faith. Parents, we can model it. See, I lived at home till I was 18 years old, till I went away to college. And in those 18 years, my dad never made one mistake that I remember him admitting. He was really my hero. I didn't think he made mistakes. So when I was about to get married, and he came to me and said, "Bob, I'd like to talk." He said, "Mom and I have been talking, and we realized that we've made mistakes. There wasn't a manual on raising you kids. And I don't know if you know this, but this is our first time as parents." And he said, "And we've looking back, and we've did a lot of things that we think are wrong. And I just want to say I'm sorry." And I looked, and I pinched myself to make sure I wasn't sleeping. I'm like, "Dad, are you okay?" My dad admitted that he was wrong. My dad admitted he made mistakes. That was it. I didn't respect him anymore. Do you think that's what really happened? No. Guess what? I moved out. I didn't have to have his advice anymore. I didn't have to come home when he wanted me to. I didn't have to listen to his lectures anymore. But guess what? Through him asking for forgiveness himself, instead of lowering my opinion of my dad, it gained access to my heart. Because now I saw he wasn't just trying to put on an image. He wanted what was best. And he modeled forgiveness. He modeled humility. He modeled what matters in life. And for the first time, all my teen years I was trying to push away. And now before I bought a car, who'd I call? My dad. Before I bought a house, who'd I call? My mom. Before I got married, I asked their opinion. When I had 2 part-time jobs that were acting like full-time jobs, and I had to pick one, I called my dad. And he wasn't the most intelligent man on the planet. No, he would give me permission to say that. He only went to the 8th grade. But he's one of the wisest men I've met. When I was being a youth director at a church, and I was having so much demand to go on the road and speak, I said, Dad, I'm really being torn. I love them both. And I think I can just keep doing both. What do you think, Dad? And he said, I don't want to tell you what to do, son. But if a flock of partridge take off, the tendency is the flock shoot. Just shoot at the whole flock. You'll miss them every time. Pick out one and aim. And you'll for sure get one, and then maybe 2. Wisdom. Why? Connected. Through what? The language of forgiveness. Well, and it's hard in our culture. Now I'm going to date myself, and you parents may remember this, and you students, if you ever saw it, it's just because of Nickelodeon. Did you ever see Happy Days? Remember the Fonz? You even know who that is? The Fonz was this guy. He had a leather jacket, lived in Milwaukee, and he was Mr. Cool. Like, he would go to the mirror. Remember that? Take out his comb and just go, hey. He could snap his fingers, and girls would run to him. I have that. No, I do. I snap my fingers, and girls run the other way. He could go up to a jukebox. Do you know what that is? That's when CDs were really big. And he could just, instead of pan, remember, he would just hit it and it would start up. So he was the ultimate man. But he hurt his friend, Richie, little redhead with freckles. So he went to Richie to say that he was, remember this? And he couldn't say, and he couldn't say he was wrong. He said, and he couldn't say that he was sorry. Let me say something clear. The biggest sign of a man or a woman is to be able to admit that you were wrong. And unforgiveness is like a cancer to our soul. Unforgiveness is like chains that bind us up. And giving and receiving and forgiving yourself and knowing that the God of the universe forgave us will free us like never before. See, it has to have the relationship before the rules. Because otherwise, it's like putting the cart in front of the horse. It's about relationship. For God so loved the world. Loved means relationship. That's what he longs for. So when you're going to get rules, students, please know this. It's because they love you. If you don't have any rules, my parents let me do whatever I want. I hate to say it, but it means they probably don't care much. A lot of people want to be a friend instead of a parent. There was a guy, Johnny. It was senior skip day. And so everybody went to Johnny's house and they threw a big party. And they got caught. One by one, they brought him in to the principal's office. And they confessed. Yes, we were at Johnny's house and we were drinking. Next person came in. Same story. Johnny came in. Johnny, where were you today? I was home sick. Johnny, we know what happened. Your friend told me. Johnny said, no, I wasn't feeling good. Johnny, everybody else told us you were at your house drinking. He said, if you don't believe I was sick, call my mom. Principal called the mom. Guess what the mom said? Johnny was home sick. Thought she was loving her son. Wasn't. Relationship is what's needed first. But then the rules. Because you care. Try running a city without laws. Try running a street department without speed limits and stop signs. The 10 Commandments should be called the tender commandments. Because he cares. Because they care. After I turned 18, when I was 18, that was when drinking was legal for an 18-year-old. I quit for 19 years after I became legal. People say, why? I said, I wanted to prove to people you can have fun without drinking. And now, I never wanted to be one of those speakers that came into my school, and went, hi, my name's Bob. I started drinking when I was 2. When I was 3, I was drinking a 12-pack a day. Jack Daniels. When I was 4, I killed my mama. Today I'm here to help you. That's not me. I never had a big problem with it. You know why I quit? I quit so I could tell people you can have fun without it. You don't have to shoot anything, smoke anything, snort anything, pop any drugs, or drink any alcohol, whether it be wine coolers, beer, or Smirnoff, to have a good time. And I proved it. But one of the last times that I did drink, I was 17 years old. And I went out with my friends. And I was foolish enough to think that I had to have something inside me to have a good time. I was even more foolish to be driving my dad's van. And I got home at about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I missed the driveway. And I hit this shrub. My mom was so ticked. I don't know why. It was an ugly shrub. But I walked in. And my mom was still, you got a mom like that? She was pacing back and forth. She was pacing back and forth. There was a hole in the carpeting. But then she likes things to match. So she blew up, made a hole in the ceiling. Said, where have you been? We've been worried sick about you. I'm like, we? I could hear Dad snoring in the background. I swore at my mom, said words that should be never said to any human being, much less your mom, and I went downstairs to bed. I don't know how it works in your family, but in my family, you talk that way to mom at night, guess who you're going to talk to in the morning? Dad. I'm laying in bed the next morning, and I hear this pounding. Well, 2 poundings. One was in my head. The second one was approaching death. My father's footsteps coming down the stairs. I felt my father's presence come up to my door. You know what you do then? Make believe you're sleeping. I felt my father's presence come up to the side of my bed. You know what you do then? Make believe you're sleeping harder. But being the brave guy that I am, I opened up one eye a little bit. Looked up at my dad, expecting to see him beat red. Steam coming out of his ears, going, you rotten kid! You know what the neighbors think of us now? You know what your mom feels like? You're grounded. Or worse yet, getting one of those lectures. We never did this when we were your age. But I looked up, and instead of steam coming out of his ears, he had tears coming down his face. And he said, Bob, I love you. What are you doing to yourself? I love you. And I said, shut up! Hit me, yell at me, ground me, give me one of those boring lectures, but just shut up. But he just kept crying and tell me that he loved me. I only saw my dad cry 2 other times in his whole life. He's not a crier. Don't get me wrong. I still got grounded. And about a year later when I could go out again, because there's still consequences to your choices. But a year later, I was out at a party, and they were throwing beer out. And all I could hear was, I love you. I love you. I love you. And I'm like, shut up! Everybody at the party was like, who? But you know what? My dad had connected to my heart. And by modeling forgiveness and asking forgiveness for himself, and then saying, I love you. I love you no matter what you do. Well, there's consequences, both that they'll inflict, but they're not half as mean as what nature inflicts. Because you can be forgiven and still have the consequence. But I knew my dad loved me. I knew I was forgiven. I had broken his trust. And that was going to take time to build back. Know something? Students, can I talk to you a sec? Yep, because I'm up here. When they say they love you, a lot of times if they don't trust you, you'll feel like they don't love you. Can I say trust and love are 2 different things? Trust can be earned. They'll love us unconditionally. We'll love you unconditionally. He loves all of us unconditionally. But there's still consequences. But my prayer is that you would know the forgiveness of God personally, as a family, one to another, from parents to students, from students to parents, and then to yourself and from God. Let's go back to the questions. Legacy point number 2. Discuss with your family. Parents, we have a question just for you to answer. Was forgiveness part of your family growing up? And explain. Explain. Be as specific as you can. And then students, how are we doing as a Christian family in the area of forgiveness? What examples can you think of? And then together, in what areas do we need to be better offer forgiveness? And in what areas might we need to have a clearer consequences?